fascinates me about this whole Catherine versus Harry and Meghan comparison is that it accidentally exposed something people have been trying to explain for years, but couldn't really put into words properly. Because the difference is not just class or professionalism or royal elegance. People throw those words around constantly, and half the time they mean nothing. The real difference is intent. That's it. Intent changes everything. And yeah, I know some people are already annoyed. Oh, here we go, another Meghan criticism video. Listen, I actually think Harry and Meghan could have built something extremely powerful outside the monarchy. I genuinely do. That's the frustrating part. They had global attention at a level most celebrities cannot even comprehend. They had sympathy, curiosity, youth appeal, media obsession, controversy, which honestly is useful if you know how to harness it. They had all the ingredients, but every single time they do these trips, something feels weirdly empty afterward. Not dramatic, just like you scroll through the photos and think, okay, but what actually happened? And I know that sounds harsh, but come on, be honest. If somebody removed all the emotional branding around these tours and just showed you the outcomes on paper, would you still call them impactful? Because that's the question nobody wants to ask directly. Meanwhile, Catherine goes to Italy for basically 48 hours, and somehow the trip leaves behind a very clear narrative, a clear educational purpose, a clear emotional tone, and a specific policy conversation around early childhood development. You understand why she was there. That matters. I think people underestimate how difficult that actually is because attention by itself is easy now. Attention is cheap. Literally anybody can go viral. A TikTok guy screaming in a parking lot can get 20 million views. That's not impressive anymore. The difficult thing is directing attention towards something beyond yourself without making it feel forced. That's the skill. And Catherine, whether people personally like her or not, is very, very good at that particular skill. Painfully good, honestly, like almost annoyingly disciplined about it. Because look at the Italy trip carefully. Every single detail reinforced the same message: the schools, the children, nature, creativity, emotional development, human connection, community care. Even the clothing choices supported the tone of the trip without screaming for attention. The colours were warm and approachable, but still polished. Nothing distracted from the mission. That level of consistency is not accidental. There is no chance that is accidental. Somebody, whether it's her team, palace advisors, or Catherine herself, because honestly, I think she's more strategic than people realize, understands branding at an institutional level, not influencer branding, institutional branding. Completely different thing. Influencer branding says, look at me. Institutional branding says, look through me toward the idea. That's the difference. And Catherine understands that her role is basically to act as a vehicle for the cause. The attention lands on her first because she's Catherine, Princess of Wales, but then she redirects it toward the initiative. Harry and Meghan often seem to do the opposite. The cause becomes the vehicle to redirect attention back onto themselves. And oof, yeah, I said it. I know that sounds brutal, but I don't know how else to phrase it anymore because the pattern keeps repeating. Colombia, Nigeria, Australia, the documentaries, the speeches, the website relaunches, the carefully curated photos. It always circles back to personal image management somehow. And again, I'm not even saying they're evil people. Internet discourse has become so stupid because now every conversation has to become angel versus demon. No, human beings are more complicated than that. I think Harry genuinely believes he's helping people a lot of the time. Meghan too, probably. I don't think they wake up in the morning twirling moustaches, planning PR manipulation like cartoon villains, but intent leaks through execution. Eventually, you can tell, like with the Australia trip, and this is where people got uncomfortable, there was all this language about listening and learning and awareness and compassion and healing and community conversations and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But where's the measurable outcome? What changed because of the visit? Did funding increase? Did policy change? Did educational programs expand? Did healthcare access improve? Did infrastructure improve? Did donations happen? Anything? And before people say, well, awareness matters, yes, sometimes awareness matters, obviously. Awareness can be powerful. But awareness without action is becoming this weird modern celebrity currency where famous people basically arrive somewhere, absorb emotional credibility from vulnerable communities, take photographs, post inspirational captions, and then leave. That sounds cynical because it is cynical, but that's genuinely what some of these tours feel like now. And audiences are smarter than media executives think. People can feel authenticity even when they can't fully articulate why. They can feel when somebody actually cares about the subject versus when the subject is functioning as aesthetic branding. Catherine's trip felt grounded because the mission already existed before the cameras arrived. That's crucial. The Early Childhood Initiative has been her thing for years now. She's obsessed with it. Honestly, maybe too obsessed, but that's why it works. She talks about it constantly. Research centers, development psychology, emotional stability in children, family environments, brain development in early years. She has stayed on the exact same lane for a very long time. Consistency creates credibility. People trust repetition when it's sustained over years. Harry and Meghan feel more scattered. 1 month it's online safety, then misinformation, then women's empowerment, then mental health, then media toxicity, then leadership summits, then lifestyle branding, then documentaries, then polo, then jam jars, then speaking events. And look, I actually understand why they're scattered, because they're trying to build a post royal identity in real time under impossible levels of scrutiny. That's hard. I honestly think most people would collapse under that pressure. But if you try to stand for everything simultaneously, eventually people stop understanding what you stand for at all. That's what happened. And the weird thing is, Harry actually used to have clearer branding before leaving royal life. Veterans, Invictus, service, military identity, brotherhood, duty. That was coherent. People understood him. There was a through line there emotionally. Now the message feels blurry. And when the message gets blurry, the public starts focusing on optics instead. That's why discussions around their tours always spiral into security costs, private jets, clothing budgets, camera crews, Netflix speculation, and publicity angles. Because there's no strong central mission anchoring the conversation elsewhere. Catherine's Italy trip anchored the conversation immediately. That's why the press coverage looked so different. Not because the media randomly decided to be nice to her. I mean, some outlets definitely favour Catherine, obviously. Let's not pretend media bias doesn't exist. It absolutely does. But good strategy also makes positive coverage easier to sustain because there's an actual framework holding the narrative together. The location itself reinforced the story. Reggio Emilia literally symbolises innovative childhood education philosophy. That's genius branding. The setting alone communicates purpose before Catherine even steps out of the car. That's smart. Actually, no. Smart undersells it. That's elite level PR architecture. Seriously. And I know some people hate when royal coverage starts sounding like business analysis, but honestly, modern monarchy is branding. That's what it is now. Soft power, symbolism, emotional storytelling, national image management, public diplomacy. The fairy tale element is still there, sure, but underneath it is an extremely calculated communications machine. The royals that survive understand this instinctively. The ones who don't survive long term. And this is where I think people massively misunderstand why Catherine resonates with audiences in a way that Harry and Meghan just don't anymore. Or at least not consistently, because it's not actually about who's more relatable. I see that argument constantly online, and I honestly think it misses the point completely. Catherine is not relatable. Let's just be serious for 2 seconds here. She's a future queen who lives in palaces, wears coats worth more than people's monthly salaries, has staff around her constantly, travels with security, and probably hasn't touched a self checkout machine in 10 years. That woman is not relatable. Be calm. But she feels emotionally coherent. That's different. People know what emotional role she occupies in the royal structure: calm, stable, polished, family oriented, duty first, controlled warmth, nature, children, art, early education. That image has remained remarkably stable for over a decade. Humans trust consistency more than perfection. Actually, sometimes consistency matters more than perfection. Because people can forgive flaws if they understand the character. What they struggle with is unpredictability, mixed messaging, emotional whiplash. That's where Harry and Meghan run into trouble constantly. One minute they want privacy, then there's another high-profile interview, then another docuseries, then another public appearance, then complaints about media intrusion while simultaneously using media visibility as their primary business engine, then anti royal commentary mixed with royal branding aesthetics, then humanitarian messaging mixed with celebrity networking. And after a while, audiences start going, wait, what exactly is this? That confusion damages credibility more than outright controversy sometimes. I mean, actually, no, not sometimes. A lot of the time. Because controversy at least creates a defined identity. Confusion dissolves identity altogether. And the Australia thing became such a perfect example of that because it looked like a royal tour structurally, without carrying the institutional weight or disciplined framework of a royal tour. That's why it triggered so much criticism. You had the photo ops, the motorcades, the speeches, the staged arrivals, the children, the hospitals, the local leaders, the emotional branding. But the follow through felt vague. It felt like an imitation of royal impact rather than actual royal impact. And before people yell at me, yes, obviously royal tours themselves are also PR exercises. Of course they are. The monarchy literally survives through public perception. Everything they do is image management to some degree. I'm not naive about that. But the monarchy has existed long enough that they understand something extremely important. Publicity alone is not enough anymore. You need institutional continuity behind the visuals. That's why Catherine's trip worked so well. The Italy visit plugged directly into years of groundwork she already laid publicly. Research reports, campaign launches, meetings with experts, long term messaging around childhood development. There's infrastructure underneath the aesthetics. With Harry and Meghan, sometimes it feels like the aesthetics arrive first. And the infrastructure maybe appears later, maybe not. And audiences pick up on that imbalance immediately. There's also another uncomfortable thing nobody really says out loud because it sounds mean, but I think it's true. Catherine seems comfortable being secondary to the mission. Harry and Meghan often seem uncomfortable unless they remain the emotional centre of the narrative. That sounds harsh, I know. But look at the difference in communication styles. Catherine's messaging constantly redirects outward: the children, the educators, the families, the communities, the research, the initiative. Even her social media posts are weirdly restrained considering how globally famous she is. Half the captions sound like they were written by a very polite museum director, which honestly, probably intentional. Harry and Meghan's communication style is far more autobiographical. The focus loops back toward their experiences, their struggles, their perspective, their healing journey, their treatment by media institutions. Again, not inherently wrong. Personal storytelling can be powerful. Oprah built an empire on it. But when personal narrative becomes the primary lens for every public initiative, eventually the initiative itself starts feeling like a supporting character. That's the issue. And honestly, I think this whole thing exposes a larger problem with modern celebrity activism generally. A lot of it has become emotionally aestheticized instead of materially impactful. That's why people are getting cynical. You can only watch so many celebrities stand beside vulnerable communities for carefully photographed awareness campaigns before eventually wondering, okay, but who benefited here exactly? And I know some people hate when conversations become outcome focused because outcomes are messy and difficult to measure, and not every charitable act needs to be transactional and blah, blah, blah. Yes, fine, true. But public humanitarian branding without measurable outcomes eventually starts feeling morally hollow, especially now. People are struggling financially everywhere: housing, food prices, jobs, healthcare. There's less patience now for elite emotional theatre without visible results attached.